Well, is the population going to balloon from 7 to 11 billion people globally? And is sustainable farming the answer to feeding all of us? Award-winning futurist, researcher, keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton joins us on Canada Now. Nick, looking at my research here, looking at the population, these numbers, are they accurate as far as you're concerned? First off, our growing population, which grows by 83 million annually. It was at 1 billion in the year 1800. It's at 7.8 billion right now. By mid-2030, it'll be at 8.6 billion, 9.8 by mid-2050, 11.2 by 2100. That sound right to you?
Well, these things are speculative, and they're based on extrapolations on data that we see. Is it going to be accurate? It's difficult to tell until we actually land there. You know what? By 2100, some of the biggest cities in the world are going to have like over 80 million people. So Lagos, Nigeria, will be the biggest city in the world. They speculate about 88 million people, and actually the top 10 most populous cities in the world will be in Africa and India. So yeah, it's going to get big, and the populations are going to grow, especially places like China, Africa, India. It's going to shrink in other places. Japan's population is shrinking. We may see some challenges in Canada and the US as well. But as a whole, the world, there's going to be more people, and we're going to have to work out how we're going to feed everyone.
Well, yes, exactly, and we'll get to that in a second. And I would think that if you really want to know where the population is going to grow most, just follow where social media companies are concentrating their work.
Yeah, I mean, the next billion people, people speculate is in Africa, right? Yeah. Africa has got the median age of 18 years old. It's very young. It's going to explode. It's one of the most exciting continents out there. It's also one of the continents that's had most advantage taken of it as well. So it's about time to empower African leadership and to really help them in a way where we don't expect too much back from them. And it's become sort of background. Latin America as well is going to be exploding in terms of size. These are very strategic places in the world for the superpowers of China, India, US, and the such like.
All right, so Nick, we need to eat, however many of us there's going to be at whatever time. Growing food and plants organically, that's the best way forward, right?
It's one of the ways. I mean, is it the best way? Can we do it at scale where we can feed out like over 11 billion people in the world? Well, it's questionable, right? Because the practices, the scale, the industrial system that we have to put around food supply, has to really deliver like huge quantities of food. There's been lots of discussion over the years of GMO versus organic versus whatever. It's going to be a balance. Not all GMO is bad. Business practices behind certain GMO sort of technologies has been absolutely terrible, and you've seen companies sort of go south because of that. Organic practices can be incredibly valuable, and I eat a lot of organic food myself. I'm very careful about the food that I eat, especially since the pandemic sort of hit and becoming a father. And it's going to be a choice, but we have to remember that there are billions of people in the world that are still on the breadline or in poverty that can't afford to pay those prices. So, golden rice is one of the GMO products out there that's sort of saved so many people from starvation. And that's an amazing thing. We have to look to these technologies, and it needs to be a balance. Organic and GMO, in certain respects, it's done in a way that's sustainable, that's empowering for farmers and not just for big business, and a way of actually doing all the farming in between as well.
Well, and we got to get behind farmers, because one would think that the more successful farmers are at growing food, the less it's going to hit our wallets.
Well, we would hope so, right? Because what we see is everyone's driving themselves towards making profit. Now, there's actually some people in the world that like Jeremy Rifkin, whatever, that are actually speculating that we're heading towards a net zero margin economy. So people doing their jobs, growing food and whatever, and selling it at cost to everyone. And that's going to be the way that sustainable sort of food supply and goods supply around the world is going to actually take us into the next century. And, that's a really interesting experiment. I do think that we're going to be headed towards that way. The bottom line is, when you're buying a bag of apples, or you're buying rice, or you're buying, greens, or you're buying, meat, there's a markup. And we have to sort of question why so many people want to profit off of that when we know that we have to provide food to everyone in the world. And that's kind of a radical idea. And when I speak to farmers, when I speak to, people that do sell product for profit, that it really affronts how they think about the world and how they think about wealth and earning money.
Have you heard that food production needs to at least double?
The United Nations is actually saying that food production needs to go up by about 60%. So by 2050 to meet the demands in the world. I mean, those numbers are a couple of years old now. They may have to be updated. So, we're going to have to get more out of the land that we've got today. We're going to have to work out what the best crops are going to be. And we're going to have to work out how we do that together. There's a lot of different technologies, bringing vertical farming into cities, becoming more sustainable in that way. There's agricultural systems across Asia and Europe that are thousands of years old that are still feeding people in the Horta de Valencia in Spain. A 12,000-year-old farming and fishing site feeds 1 million people, 6,000 small agricultural holdings and thousands of farmland plots. Why aren't we going to go back to a situation where we're going to start growing food for ourselves? I don't necessarily think that's a terrible thing. In the UK, my parents have been growing food for 40-plus years, and they've got an abundance of food that they give to neighbors as well. So it could be a good thing.
Well, that'd be interesting. I mean, only 1.4% of the world's agricultural land is being used for organic growth. I was shocked to learn how small that number is.
Yeah, because, organic farming has not been popular, and it's been expensive. It's been sort of on the fringe. So, I'm not too surprised about that number. The scale that we need to produce food is not going to be delivered from organic farming. Now, could we have organic practices at scale? Yes. Does that directly contradict a lot of the agricultural practices and business models that are out there? Absolutely. And that's the biggest problem. How do we get change in the farmers, but in the big business that goes above them, that's providing the machinery, the seeds, the fertilizer, and whatever? That's business that's hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And people aren't going to switch from that easily, right?
Yeah, and I've read that the emphasis needs to be shifted from quote, feeding the crops to feeding the soil. Are you seeing changes in the farming community and the home garden sector in more sustainable growing?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's lots of practice like no-tilling and whatever that's really coming into this. And even some of the big agricultural chemical companies like Dow and Bayer, whoever, are trying to work out how they can sustainably help farmers in a way that supports, the fringes of organic all the way through to mass crop production as well. There is a desire to do it. The bottom line, Jeff, when weather's bad and, crops are hit by mites and all sorts of, there's all sorts of challenges with the soil quality and rain and drought and whatever, you do need help. Organic farming and those practices sort of fall by the wayside somewhat when they do suffer some of those natural consequences. And then, these big business practices have worked out ways to circumvent them somewhat and help farmers grow food. So again, I love organic. I'm behind it, but it's not going to feed the world when we get to 2100 in its entirety. Would I love to see that 1% turn into 20%? Absolutely. But we need to get big business behind that as well.
What about the government? How much is the government behind and aware these escalating numbers and the sense of urgency that is feeding everybody at a certain time. Because the danger with politics is, that's so far away. Nobody's talking about that right now, so why am I even going to bother? Why am I going to do that during my administration when there are more pressing details and things that people care about in this day and age? And heck, in 2100, I'm not going to get credit for it, so why am I going to bother? Are politicians, is government getting behind this?
You know, from what I've seen in agricultural practice, especially in Canada and down in the US and the UK as well, it seems like year to year, maybe 1 to 3 years at most, the way that government starts thinking about, sustainable farming. Now, farmers need help in years where they have challenges. They need, there's a big debate around carbon tax and, carbon sinking into agricultural practices and how that should be offset and a whole bunch of things. It's incredibly complicated. We have to remember that agriculture was the thing that caused exponential growth of the planet in the first place. When you could actually grow food at scale, you could actually start having larger settlements. Those larger settlements turn into towns, they turn into cities, and it's all dependent on the farming and agricultural practices to produce food at scale. And that's exactly what we found in the growth of the world, is that now we've sort of moved away from having people working on farms. There's about 40% of people in North America worked on farms in 1900, and I think it's less than 4% now, right? So you've got these large industrially led agricultural practices to feed us. Without that industrialization, we're not going to be able to do the job that we need, which is to put food in our bellies and to have nutrition and calorific growth.
Check out NikolasBadminton.com. Futurist researcher, keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton. Always a pleasure, my friend. We'll do it again.
I'll speak to you very soon, Jeff. Take care.
All right. Thank you. Good insight, as always, from our futurist, Nick Badminton.